Alright, in this video I'm going to go over what I do to practice soldering copper pipes for the plumbing in my house. First of all, I usually get these 1/2-inch caps because they're pretty much the cheapest thing you can get for practicing soldering with, I think. I've got a pipe cutter, I've got some sandpaper, I've got some flux as well as some tinning flux. I do have the solder, and then I have this sort of pipe cleaner thing. And obviously I've got some propane and the tinning flux. Now what I do, because I'm not a professional, I don't do this every day, I do it every couple of months or so, is I just take a 2x4 that I've already cut up into pieces, and then I take a 5/8 inch drill bit and drill some holes in a couple of them. And that way I can practice with a piece of copper pipe horizontally, and I could put two stacked up and practice with a piece of 1/2-inch copper pipe vertically. And I do this because I'm not doing this every day. I'm not a plumber by any stretch of the imagination. So I do need practice before I go and do the real thing on actual water pipes. So I usually practice 4 or 5 times, basically until I get a really good result on the solder job before I go and do it live. Like I said, I don't do it every day. So the first thing I do, just take the wire brush and the sandpaper and clean up the copper pipe. And then in this case, I'm just putting a cap on. So just take the wire brush and clean up inside the cap. And this is the non-tinning flux version. Usually I use tinning flux, but I also use this one just to, I guess, get rid of it. It came with the solder. So put some of the flux on the pipe, put some of the flux in the cap, or on whatever you're going to be soldering together here. I also find in the horizontal configuration, the flux doesn't get quite as messy because it drips straight off, whereas in the vertical configuration, it actually kind of runs down the pipe. So if you have extra flux on the horizontal one, it's not so bad. If you have more flux on the vertical, then it does make a bit of a mess. So just put the cap on, and now I'm ready to solder this thing. So obviously heat up the cap, making sure that I get it on all sides, not just one side, hoping that the heat will penetrate across the entire cap evenly. So I just move it back and forth, top, bottom, side to side. And then I give it a couple tests to make sure that it's hot enough to start melting the solder. And then obviously once it's hot enough to start melting the solder, it will melt the solder and pull it into the joint. So you can see it is hot enough now. So give it a couple swipes with the solder, and eventually it'll melt and suck up into the gap. And that's pretty much it. There's the horizontal test complete. I probably went a little bit light on the solder. Like I said, it's the first one I've done in about a month, so bit of a practice, and then I'm gonna move on to the vertical. And I actually really only do the vertical. I was just doing the horizontal for funsies in this video, because most of the stuff I'm gonna be doing is in a vertical configuration. If it was in some other configuration, I would just mimic the pipe in that configuration. I take the pipe cutter, cut off that end, and now I'm ready to go and do another solder job on that exact same pipe. So the caps, I think, were $10 for that box of 25, and then this pipe was, I think, $17 Canadian. And that pipe used to be one big piece of pipe, so I cut it in half and I used it horizontally as well as obviously vertically. And then once you got the portion you soldered on cut off, you could take a look at it, and you could look inside, see if you overdid it with the solder. I think I underdid it in a couple spots there, so I wouldn't have been happy with that if that was on my house and attached to anything. So do it on the vertical. Like I said, this is the configuration that all my pipes are in. I'm going to be doing everything in a vertical configuration, so it is more important. So take the wire brush and sandpaper, clean up the pipe, do the exact same thing to the cap. This time I'm going to use the tinning flux instead of the non-tinning flux. It is a crucial step to put the flux on, and again, you don't want to overdo it. I've also found that this brush loses some of its bristles when you're putting on the solder, so make sure that you don't get any bristles stuck in the solder as well. And then obviously slide the cap on, and then I'm going to take the torch, start heating that up. Same deal, not all in one spot, side to side, back to front, that kind of thing. Try and get an even heat across the entire cap. And you can see, like I said, the tinning flux is now running down the pipe. So it does do a lot more discoloration if you're doing it in a vertical configuration than if you're doing it horizontally. So on the third attempt at this, I actually wipe off the excess flux and it doesn't make that big mess. And same deal as before, just keep testing it until the solder actually melts on the copper and gets sucked up into the cap. And there you go. There is my first attempt at a vertical one. And I do one more vertical one as well, because this one didn't turn out quite as good as I wanted. I think I under soldered that one. And that's why I do these practices. Like I said, I'll probably practice about 5 or 6 times until I got it down perfect. And there's my third attempt, so that'd be my second vertical one. So much better. Like I said, after I put the cap on, I did wipe the tinning flux off, so there wasn't as much on the pipe below the cap. And then I did use a little bit more solder. So I'm much happier with that. I'm gonna practice a couple more times, make sure that I got the technique down. Like I said, if you don't do this every day, it is a skill. It is something you should practice before going and doing it live on your house. So couple crappy practices and then one good result. So now I'm gonna do it 2 or 3 more times until I could replicate that good result every single time. And then I'm gonna go live and put some taps in my house. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.